Is up, everybody? Thank you for your patience. I know we set this up for about a half hour ago, but we're kind of running around doing a lot of things. It was a busy day down at One Bills Drive. We're going to get into all of that. This is, of course, the Staple Show, the Wednesday edition of Shout, a Buffalo football podcast, brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now, King's Hawaiian Slider Sunday $1 Million Showdown is going on, Ryan Talbot. Enter for a chance to win $1 million. Each week, King's Hawaiian is pitting two cities, sliders, against each other in the ultimate showdown, and you get to help decide the winner. Vote weekly for your favorite regional slider for a chance to win all season long and earn entries toward the $1 million prize. Explore the interactive stadium to play games, get recipes, share photos, and more. Visit topsmarkets.com/redzone to enter. What is up, buddy?
Hey, not too much. Sliders sound pretty good right now, I must say.
So sliders are good. I just like a full burger though. Like, what are the situations where you're okay with sliders? Like if you're at maybe a party or a tailgate or something like, I get that. But if I'm sitting down for like dinner, I just want a big old juicy burger.
That's fair. Like an appetizer. Yeah, like sliders would be like more of like an appetizer type deal or something like that if you were at a party or something, light food like that.
Cody over on Facebook is asking if I'm coming to Al's here in Kansas City this weekend. What's the play? I haven't heard from the Bills Mafia of Kansas City. Something, little party going on out there. Hit me up. Let me know. Maybe I should come out, check it out. I'm always up for that when I get on the road. And we're a couple days away, Ryan, and we're gonna have 3 shows over that. Let me set this up a little bit here. And we kind of do this every week. I was working on a couple guests this week. Things kind of didn't really materialize for the Wednesday show, but we're hoping to have a guest on Friday for the actual preview show. It's going to be a little bit earlier, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So get that in your calendar. We'll set that up when it's official. Tomorrow, it won't be live. But we will have an interview with Ariel Helwani, who went and had his first experience at Highmark Stadium. And then obviously tonight, we're going to talk about some of the big storylines, news stories around the Bills. And obviously in the news the last couple of days have been the whereabouts of Odell Beckham Jr. and maybe the trade pursuit perhaps of Carolina Panthers running back Christian McCaffery. And this is something we've been talking about, I feel like, for the last few months, Ryan, and it's probably the best place to start. Before we get into both of these stories and these pursuits, just talking running back Christian McCaffrey versus wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. in a perfect world, if you're Brandon Beane and you could just choose what you think fits better with this offense right now, what are you choosing?
Oh boy, and see, you use the term perfect world, so I'm going to change my answer from what I told AJ pre-show. If perfect world, everything was ideal, you didn't have to worry about injuries, it would be Christian McCaffrey. It'd be a slam dunk. The Bills don't have a running game. They haven't had a running game in the past few seasons of this offense where they've been moving the ball up and down the field at will. But obviously, there's some concerns when it comes to McCaffrey. The injury status. Not so much the contract. You could get that contract on the books pretty easily this year in terms of how much he's owed and what's left over there. You'd have to figure things out for the future, whether that's cutting him at the end of the season or doing something different with the contract in general. But he would be the missing piece in an ideal situation if you were guaranteed health, in my opinion. What about you?
Well, let me push back a little bit here, like on a couple fronts. Number one, do you have any concerns? Because one of my concerns about adding Christian McCaffrey from the jump, aside from the injury stuff, and we'll get to that in a minute, is that this Bills team is a predominantly passing team. And I think like going out and adding a running back, even though, maybe arguably his best skill set is what he's able to do in the passing game, I just don't know if there's going to be enough of a role for him. You go back over the last couple of years, and even at his highest usage rate, Devin Singletary has just not been a huge part of this offense. Now, getting him involved and maybe, using him in the passing game, I kind of get that. But are you a little bit concerned about just what role there'd be for Christian McCaffrey, whereas opposed to maybe Beckham Jr., who fit into whatever role, was asked of him on a week-to-week basis with the Rams last year? Now, again, I don't want to get too far down the road. I want to talk more about Odell on the in his own right. But we don't even know what Odell Beckham Jr. is going to look like when he gets back, or even when he gets back. We'll get to that in a minute, but I'm just saying, in a perfect world, we're talking about that right now.
Right. So first with McCaffrey, I wouldn't be too worried about his workload. In fact, I'd be more than okay with not overworking him. Obviously, he does have a history of injuries the past few seasons. In terms of getting him involved, you could line him up in the slot regularly, and I think he'd be able to produce. I mean, there was even talk, and it was just this. It was just talk about how if he really wanted to extend his career, you could transition him to more of like a slot receiver type of role on a team because he's that talented as a pass catcher. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the workload. The Bills would find a way to get him involved. Now, my biggest knock on picking McCaffrey over Odell Beckham Jr. in this situation is the trade capital. What would it cost to get Christian McCaffrey to Buffalo? I don't think they would have to break the bank. I've seen nothing concrete out there from analysts in terms of what they think it would cost. But I think day 2 picks would be on the table. Some compensatory picks would have to be on the table. If a first round pick was ever even brought up, the discussion's over before it begins. He's not worth a first round pick with the injuries, with the salary, with the fact that he plays the running back position, and that is one of the most easily replaceable positions in football. I get he's a special player, but it would come down to the compensation. Where Odell Beckham Jr., you're not giving up any draft capital. You're bringing in someone that could, you could find a role for him on there on any given week basis, as you mentioned, Matt. But 2, if Gabe Davis goes down with an ankle injury, if something happens to Stephon Diggs, you feel confident in that next man up mentality. You have someone that just won a Super Bowl, someone that's been a number 1 receiver in this league. And yes, he's coming off of an ACL injury. You raised a great point saying we don't know what he'll look like when he does come back this time around. But I have enough confidence in his game that he'd be able to play at a somewhat high level.
Spot Track, our good friend Mike Giannetti put out a tweet. You shared it with me before the show, where he basically outlined what a team trading for McCaffrey would be getting. And so 2022, you'd be picking up $575,000 bill. That's all guaranteed that you have to pay him. So basically, nothing. 2023, 24, and 25, all about $12 million on his current deal, but none of that would be guaranteed for the new team. So it would be basically like potentially a 1-year rental. Maybe you restructure that deal if you really like the player. But here's a couple things in the McCaffrey thing. Number one, there are reports out that the Bills actually have refuted earlier reports that they had called on McCaffrey. So there's not any really hard evidence that the Bills would even be interested in this. And then there's a report out from Jeff Howe from The Athletic where the Carolina Panthers, as of now, aren't really even interested in moving him. He's somebody that they still want to kind of, build around. It won't make a lot of sense unless they can get a lot of draft capital back. And I just don't know, the Bills or any other team are willing to kind of, spend a lot in terms of draft capital to bring him on. Let me bring this up here real quick. So I went back and looked at the last 3 seasons of McCaffrey because, one of the biggest issues is his injury history over he's played 6 years in the league. His last 3 have been riddled with injuries. He's played 15 games counting this season in 2020, 2021, and 2022. So I took his stats from those 15 games in those 3 years with Devin Singletary's last 15 games. And let's do a little comparison here. 230 carries for McCaffrey in those 15 games, 991 yards, 4.3 yards a carry, and 8 touchdowns. Devin Singletary, 174 carries. So already you're seeing that the usage rate is so much lower than McCaffrey. 750 yards, which is 4.3 yards per carry, exact same as McCaffrey, 8 touchdowns. Now, I know what you're going to say. The receptions, right? 80 catches in those games for McCaffrey, 680 yards, 8.6 yards per reception, and 3 touchdowns. For Singletary, 43 receptions, 323 yards, 7.5. So almost a little more than a full yard less per catch in the offense, and 2 touchdowns. But not crazy different, Ryan. I don't know if he's necessarily the same player that a lot of people remember from 18 and 19 when he was the first overall pick in fantasy drafts. I don't know if there's enough value there to get rid of a draft pick just because there's still a little bit of an unknown with what you have on the roster, what you just invested in James Cook.
Yeah, a lot of the times when these trade candidates come out, I think people envision the best version of these players, and that was McCaffrey those first few years where he entered the league by storm, and he was outstanding on the ground, and he was great catching the ball, and he was a real dynamic playmaker. He hasn't been that player the last few years. Now, you can point at the fact that Carolina has been pretty abysmal in terms of quarterback play, in terms of overall offense, coaching, you name it. But we haven't seen those flashes from Christian McCaffery that we saw early in his career. So you raise a solid point there. When it comes to the trade talks that the Bills and the Panthers both refuted, Adam Kaplan said in the offseason, this was a few months ago before the draft, that the Bills tried to reach out at that point. I believe it. I think the Bills probably made a call and said, we're a few playmakers away. Let's see if we can get them. And at that point, the Panthers probably said, no, as of right now, I believe the reports where they say the Bills haven't reached out yet, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And as you get closer and closer and closer to the trade deadline, you have a team like the Panthers. You're going to have other teams that are going to be looking to sell at that point. And I know that the trade deadline in the NFL is not a wild time in terms of players getting moved, but it's been more movement in years past than what we've seen. So the Bills could call Carolina and say, okay, we just want to see, what do you want for a guy like McCaffery? What do you want for a guy like Austin Corbett on your offensive line? Maybe someone that could come shore up this offensive line in Buffalo, provide some more depth or competition for a starting role. Someone that's pretty cap friendly in terms of his deal for this year. Things like that. That's how the NFL works. So with the teams denying it now, it doesn't mean they're not going to explore it later on. It's just right now, it's not the focal point for these teams.
Mm-hmm. Let's move over to Odell Beckham Jr. because we have a lot to get to tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in here on the Shout Podcast on your Wednesday night. We're going to cover quite a bit. Obviously, Tre White returned to practice today. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. If you want to see video of that, head over to my Twitter handle at Matt Parrino. I tweeted out a bunch of videos today from Tre White's first practice, with the team in, close to 11 months, Ryan. So really cool moment. We heard from a bunch of different players today about what it meant to him. And you could just see kind of like the emotions of it all. And I almost felt like Tre White was probably a little overwhelmed with the emotions. We'll get to that in a little while. But let's get to Beckham, because, of course, the big news of the day was people saying that Odell Beckham Jr. was at the Buffalo airport. And, of course, that started off the firestorm on Twitter earlier today. Nothing's come out yet. The one thing I thought about when I follow these kind of rumors, and I don't have any update or report on that, I definitely didn't see him around the facility, and I was there for about 3 or 4 hours today, is I feel like you'd see something on social media at some point, 10, 15 hours after that thing kind of goes. And we haven't seen anything on social media, like, Instagram, Twitter, anything like that.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. I'm not disputing the fact that he might have been in Buffalo for a flight or spotted in the airport. It's very possible, Matt, that he was just simply visiting Von Miller, and you don't have to visit the facility to go see Von Miller. It could have been post-practice, going over to his house, checking in with him. He, like Von Miller said a few weeks ago, Odell Beckham Jr. is kind of on tour right now. He's going around. He's seeing old friends. He's going to games. He was at the Giants facility, but it wasn't in a professional capacity in terms of meeting with Dable and Joe Shane. It was seeing former teammates. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's in Buffalo just to visit Von Miller. Now, like you said, though, if they really are visiting and hanging out, especially with those two players, the way they've been teasing this for months now, why hasn't there been a picture of the two of them yet? Or are they waiting for something? Or what's the deal there? I'm sure something could come out of this, but there's obviously been some reports today about the Bills not having any kind of, not in play for him as of right now. But, time will tell, Matt.
Yeah, and shout out to Tim Graham, who had a report. You can go check out the details of that over at theathletic.com. But basically saying that the Bills don't have an iron in the fire as of now. And, I think the most interesting, part of this Odell Beckham Jr. saga as it plays out over the next couple of weeks is, we're in it. We don't know when Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be back, nor do you know what level he's going to be at when he does get back. And Ryan, we're looking at the Tre White situation right now, and maybe we could talk a little bit about that as now transition to that. He suffered this injury at Thanksgiving last year.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham Jr. suffered his 2 months later, and it's the second of his career in a short time period. I mean, we're talking about a couple years ago, obviously with the Browns, and then obviously again with the Rams. So Odell Beckham Jr., he's eyeing sometime in December, probably. Is he going to be ready to go in full blast by the playoffs? I just think it's a little bit of a roll of the dice. Now, it's a roll of the dice that I think I wouldn't downplay that if I'm if I'm looking at that move for the Bills. If they go out and decide to add him to the mix as somebody to, an extra tool in case they need it for a playoff run, I get it. I just don't know if, the team that gets him is necessarily getting the version of Odell Beckham that we saw in the Super Bowl. And I don't know if he can, maybe he can't even get there in time for the playoffs.
And that's just it, with the Bills not having an iron in the fire, so to speak. They might say right now he's not even close to ready. So maybe that's why they haven't shown any interest or made any kind of play for him. They might be looking at that timeline or talking to agents, talking to people close to him to figure out when he's going to be ready. And it might be late December. It might be, well, if he's going to be ready late December, is he even going to be close to 100% for the playoffs? The playoff run is when you would ideally like him to be playing at a high level. If he's just getting back into the fold in late December, he hasn't practiced. He might not know the system, the ins and the outs. He might not look like the player that had over 100 yards in the championship game, looking like he was well on his way to being the MVP of the Super Bowl in that first half of the Super Bowl game last year. We don't know where he is health-wise. And yes, these athletes, they rebound, from these injuries better than athletes did 5, 10, 15 years ago. But you said it. This was his second ACL injury. This is not something like it's the first time. It's not like he's in his early 20s anymore. And I know he's not old by any standards either, but these get harder and harder to come back from the more serious the injury and the more often you have them.
Mm-hmm. I think only Odell Beckham Jr. knows what he can do this year. The one part of it I like for the Bills, if they were to sign him to, a veteran minimum deal that you fit into the cap, and he's just going out there to kind of show off in an offense that if he does get an opportunity, you figure with Josh Allen, he'll have a chance to make a lot of plays. He's going to be playing for his contract. I mean, he's not getting any younger. I mean, the plan is, Vaughn said it, I think on a podcast with Richard Sherman, the plan was both of them wanted to go to LA, form that kind of super team, go off kind of like they did, and then get paid. Von Miller was able to do that because he made it all the way to the end of the Super Bowl, was an MVP candidate. So was Odell Beckham Jr. before he got hurt. So I think adding that to the mix as a potential weapon, it makes sense. And I think PJ Ty over on YouTube makes a great point here. Don't give the Chiefs another weapon. You got to think about, like, if Beckham Jr. is healthy and ready to go, you don't want him going to another contender to kind of fortify things. And listen, we'll see on the other end of this Chiefs game where, things land in terms of the AFC, what's going on with Baltimore, Cincinnati, week by week. That's going to continue to be a storyline. But yeah, I think if you're the Bills, signing Odell Beckham Jr. and getting him in the mix, a guy that has now Super Bowl playoff success experience, it makes a lot of sense. And keeping him away from other teams makes sense too.
Right. And it does. And the only concern that came up specifically today for me, Matt, is the money aspect of it. I thought for sure that Odell Beckham Jr., wherever he plays in this season, he wasn't going to be trying to break the bank. He would be looking for that next contract in 2023 and beyond. But he specifically, in a chat about him being in Buffalo, he responded to some of the people commenting and said how, he let the Rams know that felt like a home to him. He was hoping to be back, and they offered next to nothing for him to return this year, and he was kind of hurt by that. So was that something maybe a few months ago? Was this something recent? I don't know. But maybe money's a bigger factor than I once anticipated, at least for this year. And if it is, the Bills have limited finances. If it's, all right, I'm going to come in here, I'm not looking for a big payday, I'm hoping to cash in next year, 2023, 2024, then it becomes more, likely that the Bills really make a play at him. But if it's anything other than that, I'm not sure they will end up showing much interest in him.
You know what you're going to show interest in, Ryan Talbot, if it comes into your possession? The Tailgate and Go Kitchen. We've been talking about this for weeks. It was featured on an episode of Shark Tank. It's a portable outdoor kitchen and dry box made for any outdoor cooking setting. tailgating? Anybody? Set it up in the backyard, backwoods, or stadium parking lot in seconds. It comes with a built-in cutting board, paper towel holder, bottle opener, spice rack, food divider compartments, storage net and lid, and a knife magnet. And now through October 29th, every time you use your Topps Bonus Plus card to purchase participating brands like Pepsi, Campbell's, Smithfield, and so many more, you're automatically entered for a chance to win a Tailgate and Go kitchen for the ultimate tailgating experience. For complete details, visit topsmarkets.com/redzone. There's so many ways to save, so many ways to win at Topps. Speaking of winning, Bills Mafia was winning today with the return of Tre'Davious White, all-pro cornerback, to the practice field, and seeing the videos of him running out there, participating in individual work. It got people really juiced up in the building. Josh Allen talked about it. Stephon Diggs talked about it. And so for those that want to learn more about it, the Bills open. He's still on the reserve pup list. They've opened up his 21-day practice window, so he could practice free of charge for the next 21 days, not count against the roster. But at that 21st day, if he doesn't return, if he's not activated, then the Bills have to wait 4 more weeks with him off the roster before they can open up another window. And so you figure that he's getting close here, Ryan. Christian Benford still dealing with that broken hand. He was in a red non-contact jersey today. What do you think this says about where Tre'Davious White is, and what is your expectation for when you want to see him?
Yeah, I think it means he's very close because of that 21-day window. That's a ticking clock now. So you have to be pretty confident that you're going to be able to activate him within that 3-week window. And I think schedule-wise, this is almost ideal because the Bills, yes, they have a game this weekend against the Chiefs. He's already been ruled out for that matchup. Then they have their bye week. That gives them a really good chance to look at Tre White. And I know the Bills don't generally do a lot on their bye week, but White might stay in the building. He might be putting in that extra work to say, I could go as early as the Packers game. Is that realistic? I think it's on the table. But if you were to ask me what game I would have circled, if not the Packers game, it's definitely the Jets game the week after that. So I think we're getting very close to the return of Tre White, and that's great news for this Bills team because I think that this weekend against a team like the Chiefs, they would have loved to have had him. He is a guy that can erase a part of the field, but you want to ease him back. You want to make sure that he gets right as the season goes on, and come playoff time, he's looking more and more like the old Tre White. So it's encouraging that they open the 21-day window, but I would not be in an extreme rush to activate him, too early. If you have to wait until day 20, day 21, do so, because it's most important to make sure that he is healthy and ready to go for games when they matter.
Yeah, and I think it's my expectation of his role once he gets back is I think he could be active, and you can be really you could slow play getting him back to 100% of the snaps. I mean, you could be looking at like December before that even happens, because listen, you still want valuable reps for your rookie cornerbacks, Kaiir Elam, Christian Benford. You're still going to rely on Dane Jackson in a lot of situations. Now, there's a lot of really advantageous matchups down the stretch after the bye week. I mean, you're talking about the Jets twice, the Patriots twice, the Dolphins again. We'll see what's going on there with Tua Tagovailoa, which he's still not expected to play next weekend, and obviously the concussion concerns are something to kind of watch. There's a lot of they won't face Deshaun Watson. It'll be Jacoby Brissett when they play Cleveland. So there's a lot of quarterbacks as you look at the Bills' schedule on the second half of Carson Wentz. It doesn't really scare you. And I just think you want to take your time with Tre White, just for what Stephon Diggs said. He's a guy that's used to competing at 100%, competing with the best in the world. He wears that CB1 badge with honor. And I think that's the message to all these guys. It's kind of funny, in the same week as we've talked a lot about, Kaiir Elam and Sean McDermott talking to him about, maybe stepping back a little bit, not being so aggressive. Sean McDermott in a different way might have to have the same conversation with Tre'Davious White when he does get back on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of having this depth that they currently have. Dane Jackson, when he's been out there, has been fantastic. Christian Benford, when healthy, when he was playing, he had a very strong start to the season. And I know Kaiir Elam was picked on last week by the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he had some flashes as well against Baltimore and against Miami, some really good moments there. Interception, obviously, against Pittsburgh as well. So there's some good and some bad. So they're not in a rush to get him back out there. It's funny, Matt, if you went back to the offseason, I think you and I would have both said cornerback position was one of the biggest concerns on this team. And yet that has not been the case through 5 games. They've been just fine. So don't rush it. When you get him back out there, play him in a rotation, ease him into the lineup. Let him get comfortable out there because it takes some time to get back up to full speed. So you want him out there, but you also don't want him playing 80-90% of the snaps. And as long as you have that quality depth behind him, you're not going to be forced to do so. Now, come playoff time, if he's still playing at full gear and he's healthy, yeah, absolutely up the snap counts as the year goes on, but ease him into that.
Yeah, I know that we've eased into the fall season and Halloween is just around the corner. And if you got big plans for the setup out in front of the house, and shout out to Billy Piano, by the way,
Yes.
super chat. Thanks, you
Bill.
to Matt and Ryan. We appreciate you, Billy, my man. But maybe you're easing into some, you've been waiting, right, for the idea to strike you for a little bit of a outdoor build for Halloween. You want to put some scary zombies in the ground or, build some type of kind of contraption to scare the kids at Halloween. Head over to Value Home Centers right now and get all of your tools needs, your building needs satisfied. And they got a great deal for you. If you text 80692 to value VALU, you join their text program. You'll start receiving exclusive coupons, see weekly deals, and so much more. Head over to valuehomecenters.com for more information. Quick update. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Hit that like button, subscribe as well. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN reported today that Micah Hyde had the neck surgery recently. Sean McDermott said he talked to Micah Hyde and he's doing well, and they're excited to get him back into the building whenever he gets to a point where he can return. Probably just to be around the guys and start doing his rehab, kind of like Tre White has done over the last year. He's going to be out 6 to 9 months. That's the timetable that he's been kind of hit with after the surgery, according to Fowler. And we'll see again how the Bills manage that and when they bring him back and how they bring him back. Neck injuries are a dangerous game.
Yeah, you got to ease him back in, and obviously, ideal world, he'll be a full go for the summer. You'd really be able to get a good look at him come training camp. He'd be in the building a lot leading up to that, you would think, with the rehab. But the good news for the Bills is a guy like DeMar Hamlin, who has really stepped up for the Bills, played at a high level of football here early on. He's someone, again, you could rotate in early on in the year if you had any concerns about Hyde getting back up to playing speed. And by September of next year, you would like to think that he'd be fine 100%, but you just never know. Like you said, necks are tricky injuries. So it's good to know that the Bills do have someone internally that can step up if needed.
Before we move on, I want to talk a little Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. I just thought that was a fun question to talk about because I think if you're looking on both sides of the ball for the Bills, you're thinking about Stephon Diggs and Von Miller, superstars that could kind of wreck a game, right? For the Chiefs, I think there's no doubt about it. That's Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. We'll debate maybe which one the Bills should be more worried about on Sunday. But before we do, there was when we were talking to Leslie Frazier on Monday, the topic of Kaiir Elam came up. And one of the things that was in the social media world after that game was how much Kaiir Elam was targeted, like you mentioned, and how many catches he gave up. I even tweeted out the PFF numbers. But go back and really watch that game and the Bills' plan and what they were trying to do. Sure, Kenny Pickett was targeting Kaiir Elam, but I think that the takeaway from that game is that what damage did it really cause? The Bills gave up 3 points in that game, and I think that was kind of the idea, to let them, complete passes underneath, get to the ball, and tackle well. And Leslie Frazier was asked about his assessment of Elam, and he said, I thought he did a good job of not giving up touchdowns. And there were some completions that they had, and that's a good receiving core that they have in Pittsburgh. And I think overall he did a really good job. He tackled well enough. You're targeted. You're going to get some balls in our league on corners. You just got to be able to hold up and not give up the explosives on a continuous basis down the field. And this is something that we keep coming back to with Leslie Frazier in this defense. And even at Tre White at times over the last couple of years, when, maybe they, giving up a couple catches, like as long as it's not getting behind them, as long as it's not going for, 30, 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns, that's really what Leslie Frazier values. And, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Now, of course, Ryan, They did give up some explosives in Arrowhead last year.
Right.
So that's something that you have to watch this week. But I think maybe a little bit overblown on the Kaiir Elam worry meter after last game.
And that's a fair talking point. You know, the Bills have a bend but don't break defense at time. You know, when you're going against top level teams, I guess, is when that bend not break defense is important. So when you're going against a team like the Chiefs, yeah, they're going to get their yards. There's no doubt about it. But when you get them in, when they're inside your 20, can you hold them to a field goal? Can you limit them more times than not? Because with an offense like Buffalo's, being able to score touchdowns, put up points, it might not matter at the end of the day. And then you have teams like Pittsburgh will give up the yards, and we know more times than not we're going to stop them before they even get into scoring range. We're going to force them to have a turnover, whether it's a strip sack, whether it's a fumble, whether it's an interception, turnover on downs, you name it. They have confidence in that defense be able to shut down the opposing team before they can get to the end zone. So bend, don't break, don't give up the big plays. I think that's going to be the big focal point for this Bills team on Sundays. Keep the players in front of you, tackle well, and then hope that when the Chiefs get deep into your territory, you can make a play like last year's regular season game. Greg Rousseau getting his hand up, getting an interception. The Chiefs were pretty deep in Bills territory on that play. They had marched down the field, and that's when the game was still somewhat close. So making plays like that is what's going to help you win this game on Sunday.
Mahomes has what is it, 15 touchdown passes on the season, and I think I don't have the stat in front of me, but 13 of them have come from 10 yards or in, which that's crazy. I mean, the red zone defense against the Chiefs this year has just been inefficient, and he's gonna have to be aware of that. And a couple people in the comment section on YouTube, Cato says, "Keep it real. Elam's footwork was looking bad." Sure, I think that we're always going to be talking about that with Elam for the next probably 16 to 24 months, is that he's developing and trying to figure out how to become a plus off coverage cornerback in this league. That's not going to happen overnight. Like I don't have this expectation that, he's going to all of a sudden turn a switch and be at the same level of a Tre'Davious White. I mean, even White took him a lot of time. He was a press coverage corner at LSU. Go back and read his scouting report, and it took him a lot of time. I'm actually really interested to talk to him about that and where he felt like what point in his career did he feel like it really switched into him becoming comfortable out there in that setting. I mean, Levi Wallace last year in his 4th year, and I know different caliber of player, different, quality prospect. He was an undrafted player out of Alabama, but he said it was in the year 4 where he was still every day working on technique. It's just going to be the reps when it comes to Elam.
Yeah, you got to be patient with it. Real quick with the Chiefs in the red zone, the Bills are going to have to be aware of everything. The Chiefs love the little shovel passes. They draw great designs. We saw that against the Raiders here very recently when they got in the red zone. Somehow getting Travis Kelce open 4 times is quite the accomplishment because he's so talented. You would think that they would be able to focus on shutting him specifically down. So Andy Reid, he's going to have that team ready to go. The Bills are going to have to bring their A game if they want to win on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's switch gears here. We got a couple of Kansas City Chiefs topics that I want to get into. We're not going to go too far down the rabbit hole. I mean, we got a preview show on Friday. I'm hoping for a guest from Chiefs country to get into that conversation and break down all the matchups and everything like that. But, Travis Kelce's coming off of a 4 touchdown performance against the Raiders on Monday Night Football. Chris Jones again has been a force and historically has done a really good job against the Bills. I mean, you go back to that AFC title game a couple years ago, and I felt like he was one of the stars of the game. So if you're going into this game as a Bills fan, who worries you more, Kelce or Chris Jones?
I'm going to go with Chris Jones, and maybe maybe fans are going to say Kelce, but I'm going Jones because although the Bills offensive line is coming off of their best game of the season, in my opinion, it's been inconsistent. They've had their struggles stopping the defenders from coming in and making plays in the run game. We've seen Josh Allen have to use his legs take off at times this season to elude sacks and pressure. And Chris Jones is in a league of his own in that category. Now, Travis Kelce is still one of the best tight ends in the game, arguably the best. You can make a case for Mark Andrews. But after those two, it's pretty much, the next tier down, in my opinion. So Kelce, as good as he is, though, I have confidence in Taron Johnson. I have confidence in some of the linebackers on this team to take away some of those passing windows and to take that away. And I have confidence in Leslie Frazier's defense to know that he is their main focal point now with Tyreek Hill in Miami, whereas before it was kind of a pick your poison, stop one, but you're not going to stop the other. I think the Bills are going to come in with a game plan to really try to slow down Kelce and say, hey, if these receivers that you brought in this offseason can beat us, then by all means do so.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to look at, and as I talk about this, I will bring it up and we'll go from there. But I think Chris Jones would probably be my answer as well. I think the interior of the Bills' offensive line, although playing better and coming off of arguably their best performance of the season at a really, really good time, I think that that's an important talking point. And listen, like we saw that Chris Jones like land on Derek Carr. Obviously, it was kind of a bogus call. Did you just say I'll never stop to David?
Yeah. Yeah.
David said Ryan stop, which I don't even know what he's actually referring to. I didn't hear anything that was
I'm
that
assuming
egregious
that
there.
he likes. I'm assuming Kelce is the easy option to him.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I am going to talk a little bit about Kelce, but come on, David. It's funny. I just saw the comment that you said, I'll never stop, David, and it just got me kind of laughing. Anyway, so yeah, that's a concern. And Josh Allen's taken a lot of hits this year already. I mean, obviously a lot of them happen when he gets out in space and gets running, but you don't want Chris Jones sneaking back there and putting big hits on your quarterback. He is a big dude. So that's something that I'm obviously going to be watching. But I think that, although the Bills have not allowed a touchdown to a tight end yet this season, Travis Kelce has got to scare you a little bit. There's speed everywhere for the Chiefs. I mean, Valdez Scantling, we're going to talk about him in a second, McCole Hardman, even Jerick McKinnon, these are guys that, they can get the ball in their hands. They can make plays. But Kelce's always kind of found a way to make plays against the Bills, even when they've tried to highlight him. And I know when Tyreek Hill was there, it was a little bit different. Couldn't really focus maybe so much on one. But we saw it last week, Ryan. There were plays against, or this past Monday night, where the Raiders had him covered. There was one play coming across the middle. I think it was Denzel Perryman who kind of hit him. It looked like he was completely out of the play. He stopped on a dive, went back the other way, flashed open. Patrick Mahomes got him the ball. He breaks the tackle. He evades two tacklers. It's crazy stuff when it comes to Kelce. And I think, they have a plan for him. They'll have a plan for him, but sometimes he's just better than the plan. And, it's going to come back, flip it over to the other side. And Josh Allen might have to be in a situation like he was at Arrowhead a couple months ago, where he's just going to have to outduel them at the end of the day, which I think they can do.
And I agree with that. And yeah, Kelce is a special tight end. He's not slowing down. And again, he's not old by normal standards, but for tight end standards, you'd think that he would be starting to slow down a little bit, but no signs of that. Still a great route runner. Still kind of knows, has that connection with Patrick Mahomes in terms of knowing what to do if that route is taken, as illustrated by the one route you pointed out there. Perriman had him covered. He stopped on a dime, went the other way. And Mahomes was patient enough to wait and find him in that role. If the Bills can get after Mahomes, however, then maybe Kelce won't be as much of a factor. Maybe if they just cover him as he is running his normal route, nothing will end up opening up because Von Miller or Greg Rousseau will get home, or one of the defensive tackles. You get the gist. So there's a lot of pressure on that defensive line to step up to make sure that Kelce can't take over this game.
Valdez Scantling has, I'm just doing the research here, 3 100-yard games in his last 3 seasons. As a rookie, he had 2. He had 3 catches for 103 yards and 3 catches for 101 yards. So historically in his 5-year career, he's not been a guy that consistently gets off. He had 90 yards receiving last week against the Raiders. So he's definitely somebody that I think you want to have on your radar. But I just think Kelce, there's a next level for, connections in this league. Like you think about historically, the players, the quarterbacks and their receivers or pass catchers who have had good relationships. Obviously Jim Kelly and Andre Reed were one right here in Buffalo. Those guys they usually take good game plans and wreck them. And that's what I wanted to bring up. And I just think that they have to really focus in on not letting him be the terror that he is in the red zone. And I think they're game to the challenge. So I was talking to Karen Johnson about it today, and what makes them so tough is, basically what he said is what makes them so tough is like the off script stuff. Like when Patrick Mahomes gets out of the pocket, it's similar to Josh Allen. It's just what he's able to do, like the different arm angles that you have to deal with, not knowing exactly, where he's going, when he's going. And a couple of those throws to Kelce the other night, you probably didn't even know he was making that read because he's so good at making plays after the play seems like it's over, that's something that they're really focusing in on. And I think, it's going to come down to the pass rush and how much can now Von Miller and company affect Mahomes to put these guys in the back end in a better situation when they have to run that scramble drill.
And this is like the Von Miller game, in my opinion. And when the Bills lost to the Chiefs, the one thing that we heard was the Bills didn't get after him, Mahomes enough. They didn't hit him enough. They didn't sack him enough. So you enter Von Miller. And when I say it's the Von Miller game, it's not all on him, but it's up to him to show that he can have a presence. That everything we've seen from Greg Rousseau as a beneficiary of having Von Miller can make a presence. That Boogie Basham and Epinesa in their roles can do their job. And the defensive tackle position keeps playing at such a high level as well because they're getting some pressure. We've seen Jordan Phillips make some sacks and get some quarterback hits. We know Ed Oliver, when healthy, can do that as well. They have a great D tackle in Daquan Jones and Tim Settle. The list goes on and on. They invested a lot in this defensive line. They're getting a lot more out of this defensive line than they did the 2021, 2020 units that they had before. So I'm excited to see what this unit can do against Mahomes and company because they need to bring their A game and affect the quarterback if the Bills plan on winning this game.
Are you surprised? Our producer AJ brought it up in the chat here that we have during the shows. First time Patrick Mahomes is not favored at home. Were you surprised when that came out?
Yeah, completely surprised. And if you're a Bills fan, I would hate this. Because it has nothing to do with the Bills. It has nothing to do with Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, Brandon Beat, anyone on this team. But I almost guarantee you that Andy Reid is using this as bulletin board material, Matt. And he's, hey, they're the Super Bowl favorites. They're coming to our house. They're favored. We're the team that's just beaten them the last few years in the playoffs, but hey, we're the underdogs now. They're going to try to use that to their advantage to kind of psych themselves up for this game. And while some fans might say, well, if you really need to get psyched up for a game like this, what are you doing? Players find any reason to get psyched up for a game, any at all. They're all high-class athletes, but if they have that extra motivation, they're going to use it. And I think that the Bills being the favorites in this game on the road is going to be a motivation factor for all the Chiefs players.
So the Bills opened at -1.5 on DraftKings, and it's bet to -2.5 now. So the money is coming in on the Bills, and I get what you're saying, and I would agree in most places, but I get the vibe in most situations, in most years. I get the vibe that the Bills, like, I'm sure that there's going to be a chip that the Chiefs put on their shoulder, although I also think that there might be a little bit of a big brother vibe that they have with the Bills at the same time where, no matter what, the big bad Bills that finally put it all together and Josh Allen raised his game to the level of Patrick Mahomes, and it didn't even matter in the end because they just made more plays. That I think they're going to hold some of that in this game still. And so where there might be a little bit of that, the Bills have just been the best team in the NFL through 5 weeks. I mean, their +91 point differential is insane. Look at what the Titans have done against every other team that they've played. I mean, they're 3-2. They don't have AJ Brown anymore. And they've been competitive, or they've won and they've beat up a couple teams, and they got absolutely smacked by the Bills. The Steelers will probably end up closer to 500 than anybody thinks, and these two teams didn't even deserve to be on the same field. If not for the Heat down in Miami, you're probably looking at a 5-0 Bills team going into this game, and I think a team that is feared when guys are going out without starters, Isaiah McKenzie, Dawson Knox. It doesn't even matter. Gabe Davis goes off. Rookie Khalil Shakir goes off. They're getting James Cook involved. I think there's a lot of moving parts, and now with the new look of the defense, I feel like it truly is now the hunted versus the hunter. Like the Chiefs are still the hunted. They're the reigning AFC, or they're the last AFC team to win a Super Bowl, right? But I don't know. It feels like a different vibe. Do you feel any of that?
I go into this game, I look at them as being pretty even in terms of their talents, their abilities, their play. And that's why I go back to the fact that usually when all things are even, the home team is favored by about 2.5, 3 points. So the fact that Vegas had the Bills being that better team and by that much on the road against a team like the Chiefs surprised me a little bit. Now, maybe the Bills will come out and they'll win this game and they'll roll past the Chiefs. And at that point, if that happens, Matt, then man, there's no more questions about this team if there even are any right now, because if they can go into Arrowhead and make a statement against the Chiefs, then if this team can stay healthy at the most important positions, there's no reason to doubt that this might be the year that they can go all the way.
We'll be with you guys for a little bit longer here. One other thing I want to talk about is like this polarizing 13 seconds conversation, because it's one that, certain members of the media are still following that storyline pretty heavily over the last couple of days. And, I saw some tweets about it today, like almost like an eye roll emoji, right? Like, are we still talking about 13 seconds? And, it's interesting because from my perspective and how I'm covering this game this week, the 13-second story, it's been covered pretty heavily since, January of last year, right? So in a lot of ways, the story for me really isn't the 13 seconds until after the game. Like if the Bills lose like a close nail biter where, they're not able to get over the hump in the fourth quarter, then I think that you revisit that storyline for sure. But, they won in this spot last year in the stadium. And so I think it's more of a situation where I'm waiting till after the fact. But at the same time, I'm not bothered with the conversation. Although I'm not like really a Bills fan either. So I guess like, it can be something that you probably don't want to relive this over and over again. I saw one comment from a buddy of mine that I grew up with on Twitter today, where it's like he straight up avoids anything that has to do with 13 seconds. I'm sure that there's a happy medium, but there's no doubt about it, Ryan. This still is a storyline nationally going into this game. It's going to be something that they talk about. Troy Aikman talked about it on the broadcast on Monday Night Football. They're going to talk about it in the booth before the game. Jim Nantz and Tony Romo. It is still something that the Bills are going to have to deal with. Von Miller, I just put up a story at the site, though. He said ignorance is bliss. He wasn't here, so he didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, have the mute button on hand, Bills Mafia, because between the commentary and the videos, you're going to see a ton of it on Sunday, because this is the first matchup since the 13 seconds between these two teams. So it's still going to be a major talking point. Here locally, listen, you're not going to get anything out of Sean McDermott and company or anyone that was here for that game. They're just not going to react to it. But nationally, it's still a storyline. It's going to remain a storyline. Until I think, in my opinion, until the Bills can either knock off the Chiefs in the playoffs when it matters, or advance, like I said, to the Super Bowl, win the whole thing, whether or not they run into the path of the Chiefs or not.
All right, Ryan Talbot, I'll push the baton over to you. What do you want to cover here before we get out of here? We got 2 more shows coming up this week. By the way, are you going to be on the Ariel show tomorrow at 3:00?
I'm going to try to jump in on that. I think I'm going to be able to get back in time for that. Well, let's cover this one, Matt. Is this a must-win game?
Ooh, I love that conversation. Nothing's a must-win game, in my opinion, when you have the roster that the Bills or the Chiefs have. I mean, we saw it last year. The Bills won in the regular season, and it still ended up being the Chiefs who got the home game, right? So it's like, I think a lot of things can change. Like your projections are just projections, and however those games end up playing out down the stretch for the Bills on their schedule, they could lose this game and still, win the number 1 seed, because the Chiefs maybe end up playing in a tougher division, which it's not, by the way. Now I think the AFC East greater than the AFC West to start the season. The Jets have been a little bit more game than anybody thought. The Patriots are still pesky because of that defense, and I still think the Dolphins have a solid squad. So I'm not going to go as far as to say it must win, but this is the kind of game where I feel like you can assert your dominance and give yourself a little wiggle room and room for error down the stretch. If you do run into any of those inconsistent stretches like we saw in the middle of last season, that I do think it's must get the number 1 seed if you're the Bills. That's got to be the mindset, and a good way of getting there is beating the Chiefs on Sunday.
Yeah, that's well said. I don't view this as a must-win game either. And for me, it just goes back to last year's playoffs. Yes, the Bills went on the road to Arrowhead and they lost to the Chiefs that had that seeding. But what happened the next week? The Bengals go on the road and they win it. if you are facing a great team and you have a great team yourself, it might just come down to who has the ball last. And for the Bills, it just wasn't in the cards for them to have the ball last against the Chiefs last year. So whether it's at home or on the road in the playoffs, I think the Bills can beat this Chiefs team. I think they can beat any other team in the AFC. So I don't think that getting the 1 seed is necessary for the Bills to get to the Super Bowl this year. Is it their end game and their goal? 100%. Yes, they want every team to come into Western New York, Orchard Park in the playoffs. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But when you have a team like this, a roster like this, I don't care if you're playing in Kansas City. I don't care if you're playing in Buffalo. I don't care if you're playing on the moon. The Bills have enough talent, Matt, to win against whoever they put in front of them, wherever that game is hosted.
You know where you can win anytime, any place when you're inside a Tops Markets. And right now, check out these deals. Ryan Talbot, we've been talking about him for weeks, months. Let Tops do all the work for your game day and tailgating spreads. Not going to Kansas City? Get yourself stocked up. Invite all your friends over to watch the big game. Tops is the perfect place for game day or any day. Visit Tops Carryout Cafe. And Ryan, we were joking about this the other night. We were driving home from the after the Bills played the Steelers. Yes. I was driving you back to your hotel, and we were thinking about jumping into a carryout a Tops to take a little selfie in front of the Carryout Cafe. It would have been fun.
Missed opportunity. Next time. Next time.
Hot to go, fresh large cheese and pepperoni pizzas, $14. Jumbo chicken wings, 10 count, $14. The legendary Tops breakfast pizza. You can get a large for $20 right now. Pizza or taco logs, 6 count, $7.69. Baby back rib sections, $5.99 a pound. Plus subs, sandwiches, wraps, apps, sides, so much more. Visit topsmarkets.com/redzone for the complete menu of ready to enjoy fan favorites. Wrap us up, Ryan Talbot.
Yeah, Bills Mafia, once again, just dropping a plug for Real Men Wear Pink, raising money this month for the American Cancer Society. I slacked on putting the link into the chat on YouTube a day or two after our live show. I will put it in tonight as soon as we wrap up here. Any donation is appreciated. It's for a great cause. Like I said, I appreciate the support, Bills Mafia. Anything you can do would be appreciated.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe before you go on YouTube. We'll be back with 2 more episodes before the big game on Sunday. Make sure you check. I will set up the live on Friday for the preview show. The aerial show will be taped. It won't be live, but we'll get that up on YouTube right away. Have